All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Grant. I'm an account executive with TEL Staffing and HR, and I want to thank you for joining us on our for our panel discussion about the coronavirus stimulus and as it applies to your business. We're going to try and answer all your questions, and we've got a list of things that we believe are going to be of interest to you. We'll be able to take questions online. There's a section on your GoToMeeting where you can ask questions. We've already had one come in, so I'm going to give it just a couple minutes here and go over a little housekeeping so that we can give other people a few more minutes to get on. But bear with us as we go through this. We're in a pretty good sized room, and we're all spread out around the room to kind of keep our distance from each other. So as we try to connect with each of the panelists, there's four of us and a producer in here, 5 of us in here. So bear with us as we figure that out as we go. After the seminar, after the webinar, there's going to be a survey that you can fill out, and we'd ask you to please fill that out so we can approve on the quality of the content when we do something like this for you guys. We will also be recording this and posting this on our website at telstaffing.com. We'll supply a link to that after the fact. Let's see, the application, we have the application posted on our website, but I just was informed by all the gentlemen today that it's changed 2 or 3 times since it came out on Tuesday already. So I think what we're going to probably do, and we'll solidify that, is provide a link to the application. For those of you that are TEL clients, anybody that's on the webinar today will have your required reports and a link to the application by noon tomorrow. If you have any questions, as I mentioned, feel free to ask them, and we'll try to address them as not as they come in, but as we can fit them in. We'll kind of go through our content, and then we'll check out the questions and go back to that. I'm going to try to address things to each of the guys as I see fit, and they can defer to somebody else if they don't feel like they're the right person to answer the question. You can also, if you come up with something that you think deserves or needs a more detailed answer, or you need more detailed information, you may email us at hr@telstaffing.com, and one of the experts from our team will get back with you on that. So let's get going. We'll introduce the guys. I'm going to tell you who we're here with, and then they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get into the questions. So first of all, I've got SBDC, Small Business Development Center Representative Dorian Zverdich.
Hey everyone, so I'm Dorian. I'm the Associate Director at the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center at UWF. So of course we all know what the SBA is, that federal agency. So in times of no disaster, when everything's okay, they give my organization funding to offer no-cost consulting services for small businesses. So usually if you ever need consulting assistance, the SBDC is there. During times of disaster, we assist people with the loan processing, answering questions, but also I'll talk about later the Florida Bridge Loan. So it's a special Florida specific loan. My experience personally with disasters and everything, if you live in the panhandle of Florida, you've probably heard of Hurricane Michael 2 years ago. I was personally in the field, my staff of 20, we were all in the field working overtime in disaster recovery centers, right next, side by side with FEMA representatives, SBA representatives. I was in Mexico City, Panama City, Mariana, Bluntstown. So we have a lot of experience with this, and we're just happy to be here.
Thank you, Dorian. Next, we've got Rick McClanahan with Synovus Bank.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this particular webinar. Again, my name's Rick McClanahan with Synovus Bank. I've been in banking for about the past 15 years. I'm currently in commercial banking with Synovus Bank in Pensacola, Florida, and have been working, on disaster relief loans and payment protection loans for about 3 days. So hopefully I can spread all the knowledge that I have gained over these last 3 days, particular to these programs, to help you and your businesses out.
I think that's kind of key what Rick said right there, the knowledge I've gained in the last 3 days. So all of you know that this is a lot of this is shooting from the hip, but and changing all the time. So as much as we can, we're going to give you links. We already know of a couple. We're going to give you links to where you can get information that'll be updated regularly. So we'll answer the questions to the best of our ability. We've gone over it pretty extensively in the last few days, and we'll go from there. Next, we've got Ed Rouse. He is TEL Staffing and HR's in-house CPA, and also retired United States Marine Corps.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ed Rouse. I'm a certified public accountant, and I've been in public practice for 40 years. And I'm going to try to give you some information today on the tax effects and some of the tax rebates that have been put into place to help small businesses get past this virus and pandemic. And I'm very pleased to be here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send them on to us, and we'll try our best to answer them.
Ed, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here. I know you're taking time out of a real busy time in your schedules, so we appreciate you being here. So let's get started with the obvious question that I'm sure is on everybody's mind. All these programs, you've probably heard of Payroll Protection Program, the Stimulus Act, the CARES Act, the coronavirus stimulus. What are these? What's the difference between all of them? I think that's something maybe Dorian, you could handle for us.
Yeah, so the CARES Act is the official act, and the PPP and stimulus, those are just the CARES Act is a stimulus act, and the PPP is one of the brand new programs that just came out of it, the Paycheck Protection Program.
Excellent, excellent. And Dorian, who's eligible for these different programs?
Gotcha. Okay, so real quick, if I'm just going to cover SBA programs real quick. So the two main federal government programs are going to be your PPP and the EIDL, the EIDL, which is known officially as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. The vast majority of small businesses in our nation are eligible for these programs.
That's 500 for the PPP, and that is 500 employees and under?
Correct, 500 employees and under for both loans. Very specific loans, very specific industries may have different requirements, like sales requirements. So if you're a hotel, for instance, you have to have sales of 35 million or less. But as a general statement, odds are if you're on this webinar, there's a 99.9% chance that you qualify for both.
Excellent. Let's start with the Paycheck Protection Program, because that's one of the biggest things that and concerns on everybody's mind is keeping two things, right? Keeping people working so that they can take care of their families. And then for the business owner, they have that concern. But the second concern is, how are they going to pay these people? And that's what the Paycheck Protection Program is all about. So Rick, is this a loan?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it is a loan. It's a loan that has, of course, specific caveats and specific parameters in which the funds that are being distributed, can and will be forgiven if they're spent in the correct way. If not, then those funds would obviously convert into a loan, and then it would obviously have payments that go along with that.
Excellent, excellent. And then there are some forgiveness parameters attached with these, which we'll get into a little bit later. What's the maximum, Rick, what's the maximum amount of loan a business can get?
So the maximum amount is it's increased from what would traditionally from an SBA loan would be 5 million. They've increased it to 10 million. So that would be 10 million be the maximum.
What's the difference between this one and all other SBA loans?
Well, there's a bit of difference. There's the certain little parameters that have been waived within the payment protection loan program. This loan was enacted through a state of emergency or a natural disaster, and so it makes it a little bit unique from that standpoint. And as well as this program has a little bit of differences in terms of who guarantees the loan. Is it guaranteed by the business and the person? So there's a lot of those things that make it different as well.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Dorian? Like, for instance, I think these are 100% guaranteed, right?
Correct. So the banks take no position in these loans. The federal government's guaranteeing the entire loan.
Excellent. Okay. The coverage period, this is too easy, so I'll just answer. It goes from February 15th, 2020 through June 30th of 2020. I'm not sure, Rick or Dorian, you guys can kind of decide which one's best to answer this, but how do you determine the maximum value a company's loan that a company can get?
Gotcha. So the official policy is the max is going to be $10 million or 2.5 times your average monthly rent. Officially, when you apply, it will likely be, the SBA will likely dictate what that is officially.
Okay. When we're talking about average monthly payroll cost, what does that include?
So I'll tell you what it doesn't include. It doesn't include like your federal withholding or anything. So generally, if you offer medical leave, vacation days, things like that, or sick leave, it covers that as well. And also, of course, gross wages.
Does it count, like TEL does, we do the payroll processing for, that's what we do for many companies. Those fees that we charge, can they include that in the average?
I'm going to defer.
Rick?
Say again.
Can a business that we do business with, we process their payroll, so we have a fee for processing their payroll. Is that included in the amount that they can calculate towards their average?
You know, it's a really good question, and that's one that's very specific, and I haven't seen specifically saying that those fees are covered, but just I think just thinking through the process of where you're paying traditionally your payroll and you're paying somebody to process that payroll. So I think if you use deductive reasoning, it should be covered, but I'm not the final say. So I would certainly
we'll
have to
try and get
follow up.
that question answered. We've determined here that we are adding it into ours. So we've made that determination, but we'll try and get a better answer on that. Lonnie had asked that question. Also, Carla, if you're listening, you and I had talked, and Dorian just mentioned that the federal taxes are not part of this. So I think that answers the question we had from yesterday, and also the screenshot you sent me answered that the same way. So I think we're on the same page there. We talked about how the loan's guaranteed already. Loans greater than 100, there used to be, can you tell me about how that works, Dorian? Traditionally up to 150,000 were 85%? Is it regardless of size, I guess is the question.
So yeah, correct. Now there is, generally with SBA loans, there are certain sizes and everything. Now I believe that they're not.
Okay, yeah, that's what, previously it was 85% up to 150,000 and 75% over, so.
And there are a whole bunch of things at the SBA, because it's a time of disaster, that they're waiving. So they're also waiving like fees for starting the loans, things like that.
What about in the instance of sole proprietors, independent contractors, those kind of people?
Yes, they still could apply for the PPP. My recommendation, of course, this is a brand new program, but just working with the SBA for the past several years, it's likely that they will go straight to the source, look at your tax return. So if you're a sole proprietor and everything, they will likely mandatory require to see your tax return, or they'll ask for it. That way they could use the official documents that you put on your taxes to determine what your average, what you pay yourself each month.
Okay, Ed, I think this is a good point where you had wanted to talk about record keeping, since Dorian mentioned tax returns. It's maybe a good point to interject your thoughts on the record keeping for a business owner.
Sure, Jim. Typically in my 40 years of experience, when it comes time for a business owner to apply for a loan, the bank is going to ask for certain types of records. It's just a common sense thing. However, most businesses, or many of the businesses, have not been up to date with their records. So as part of this loan process, you're going to have to document the transactions that took place in January and February, at least, in order to get for the payroll activities, the calculation for the loan, 2.5 times payroll. If your books are not up to date and your records are not up to date, you're not going to be able to produce a year-to-date financial statement either. So it's absolutely critical, irrespective of what the other guidelines are in the loan process. It's absolutely critical that people have their books and records up to date so that those records and books can be submitted to the authorities and the loans can be processed quickly without any obstacles. It's very important.
Okay, thank you. Something else that you mentioned, as long as we're talking about taxes, is at irs.gov, when it comes to taxes, there's a link for COVID on the irs.gov homepage. So you can go there and get some questions answered if you have them about taxes as well. I think this is probably Dorian's question. Do employers need to keep a certain percentage of their employees in order to receive the loan?
Gotcha. So I don't know the official answer on that. I will tell you what I do know. If you cut your employees' wages by more than 30%, then the portion of the loan that will be forgivable will decrease. So I know that for sure. We also do know that, let's say you let some people go and you're going to apply for the PPP, the rule is that you have to rehire relatively quickly, which is by that June 30th deadline. So I don't know specifics on what percentage of employees you have to keep. I will find out and I will let you know so that we'll let it out in the email. My best recommendation, just general broad recommendation, if there's any way you could keep your employees, you know, the government's giving out this PPP program in an effort of good faith to help small businesses. So they're going to expect you to also return the favor.
Great. Let's see here. So are there any, Rick, any credit, the typical credit requirements? Previously with these loan programs, business owners had to prove that they could not obtain credit elsewhere. Is this requirement still in place?
Good news is that that requirement has been waived. So you know, what that would typically cover is if a business had access to capital, such as a line of credit, you know, a home that you could take a home equity line, you know, things of that nature, and you had access to those things, then the SBA would encourage you to explore those avenues first before coming to them for lending needs. You know, at this time, those parameters have been waived.
Any additional fees for these loans outside of the interest rates?
Right now, there are no additional fees that I'm being told, but our full program has not been launched. So in terms of the fees that we would charge on the front end, you know, for what I'm being told, there is none now. But
I believe they're waiving prepayment fees on these too, right?
Yeah, there won't be any prepaid penalty fees and things of that nature. No.
Okay. What about how long do they take to process the approval? What's the approval process like?
So the approval process will look, you know, something like this: is, you know, once your bank has solidified their process to, you know, accept applications and financials to make these things happen, you know, we'll take those things internal. They still have to be underwritten. It's been pretty clear that while we're underwriting these requests, the SBA will make the credit decision and the approval decision. Once that comes back, then we'll distribute the funds to the you know, execute the documents and distribute the funds.
How long do you think it'll take to distribute once you have an approval?
Once we have an approval, the SBA is trying to get the distribution down to 10 business days. So you know, we haven't been given a firm date on that yet, but you know, likely more to come.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what we had here. Also, just a note that I had here from the Wall Street Journal is that the SBA reportedly plans to have a process in place by the end of next week. So I guess what that's saying, you might correct me if I'm wrong, is that they don't even know exactly, they're not going to know exactly how this is all going to go down. While you can start applying tomorrow on Friday, they're not going to know exactly how it's going to all go down until maybe next Friday.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is this is a fluid situation. You know, I think that we came into this and we continue to be in this fluid situation, and this is really no different. This is you know, these are emergency funds and, you know, and special laws that are being enacted to make these funds flow. So these are things and processes that have to be created, and it takes time to create those processes. And I'm sure that those folks behind the scenes are working their hardest that they possibly can.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also like to interject, just requesting from the general public, because right now my office is processing those bridge loans that I'll cover in a second. We help our clients file for the SBA loans, for bridge loans and everything. Please be very patient with any loan product you may apply for. So if you're doing it, you know, the PPP with your banker, if you're doing the EIDL loan with the SBA, or if you're doing the state of Florida bridge loan or a bridge loan for your specific state, please be patient. Your application is not being forgotten. It's just this disaster is so big that nobody was prepared for something like this, and everybody in the entire chain of the loan application has a backlog. So we're doing everything we can, and we just need the public's help to try, if you can, minimize the amount of times you guys would call and go, hey, can I get a status update or something like that? Because everyone is overwhelmed.
All right, great. What about Rick, collateral or personal guarantees?
For the PPP loan, there is, we're not asking for collateral. We're not asking for a personal guarantee at this time. So there's none related.
And then
Excellent.
I'll also interject for the economic injury disaster loan. Technically no collateral requirements. However, if the SBA does offer you a loan over $25,000, they will ask you to pledge collateral. The good thing again about the federal government with the EIDL loan only is they never decline you if you don't have enough collateral. Again, it's just the government going, we're doing good faith effort. You have to just pledge collateral if you can. And if you don't meet collateral requirements, they don't care. They just need that good faith effort.
Okay, thanks, Dorian.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think, Dorian, you're probably the best one for this too. What can the funds for the PPP be used for?
Gotcha. So I'm going to read the list: payroll support, paid sick leave, mortgage payments, rent payment, and servicing existing debt. Now I'm going to give you my personal opinion for me being a SBDC consultant and what I tell my clients. So we just discussed there's this PPP program that's really the forgivable loan if everything's done right, and then there's that normal EIDL loan. So I'm recommending to all of my clients, if you dedicate the PPP funds to payroll only, that would give me a higher confidence in, I'd be confident that you would have a larger portion of your loan forgiven, if not fully forgiven. So my recommendation is, if you need a loan, get the PPP for payroll and get the EIDL for everything else and pay everything else. Because the big distinction on, hey, can I apply for both? Yes, you can apply for both, but the rule is if you get the PPP and the EIDL, you can't use both of these loans to pay for payroll. So you apply for the PPP because I want you to get that loan. I want it to be forgiven. Throw everything on payroll for that, and then apply for the EIDL if you still have bills to pay. So let's say you have to pay your creditors or something like that.
Since we're at the EIDL right now, it just came in from Justin Hewell. How is the EIDL loan amount calculated?
That I don't know. That I just at the mercy of the SBA underwriter. Good question, but it's just one of those things, they figure it out. So they ask you a lot of questions about your business, then they'll reach out to you if they need additional information, and it's just a calculation that's internal to them only.
And while your recommendation is that you use the PPP to handle all the payroll and get an EIDL for your other expenses, you can use up to 25% of the PPP loan towards business expenses.
Correct, for the other ones, yeah. So the rule on the forgiveness is if you get the PPP, 25% or less will forgive like your mortgage payment, and then 75% or more will be for the payroll. So 75% or more implies that it goes up to 100%. That's why my personal recommendation is get the PPP for 100% of your payroll.
So you already covered that if you've received a bridge loan, and just to be clear, if you're in Northwest Florida here, which is where Dorian is based out of, and if you could just kind of cover this real quick,
yeah.
SBA, and with the SBA and the SBDC, with these loans, if you're in the Northwest Florida here, it's going to be a Florida small business loan. If you're not in Florida, it's probably, it could be particular to your state or an SBA bridge loan.
Correct. Yeah. So I'll take like a couple minutes just to make sure everyone understands.
Go ahead and get those. You wanted to talk about the small business COVID-19 recovery grant, the small business emergency bridge,
Gotcha.
the SBA expressing grants.
Okay. So I'll just real quick, there's a disaster. I'm going to use the Florida as an example because that's where I live and everything. Once there's a disaster like a hurricane, it's easier to imagine, everyone starts offering you money. So you have to realize that there are different organizations that don't necessarily talk to each other. So the bridge loan program is officially called the Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program. That is strictly for Florida businesses, and it's a $50,000 loan. It's a short-term loan, and it's 0% interest for 1 year. So we call it a bridge loan because it does exactly that. It bridges your gaps. So Florida is one of the few states that has a bridge loan, although I do know that the state of Connecticut, due to COVID, actually 2 weeks ago released their own version of a bridge loan. So be sure to check with your local SBDC or look to see if your state offers it. But what Florida has found out years ago since Hurricane Andrew is when a hurricane or a disaster strikes, if a business has no cash, their chances of being in business get to zero. If they can't have cash to try to recover, they just won't. So disaster hits like COVID, you have difficulty paying your bills. The state bridge loan, I personally am one of the people that processes it. We process the loans much faster than the SBA. Not a slight on SBA or anything, it's just you have to realize this is a Florida program, so we actually have more resources to do it, whereas the SBA is now helping the entire nation. So bridge loan is the state going, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner, I know you need cash now. We're going to give it to you. You just have to pay us back within a year. We know you're going to apply for another loan. So that's step one. The other two are the EIDL, the EIDL loan. This is the bread and butter traditional disaster recovery loan. Whenever you think of a disaster, EIDL has always been there with the SBA. So that's your long-term financing where it's up to $2 million. Right now it's capped at 3.75% and it's up to 30 years. All of that again is determined by the SBA. So they'll either offer you a 7-year term, a 30-year term, it's all up to them. But the goal is for the person or the business owner to then apply for the EIDL loan because that's really your recovery. That's your long term. It's much easier to pay off, $300,000 in 12 years than in 1. So generally people get the bridge loan, they get the cash quick. Then while they're waiting, they get the EIDL loan, then they pay off the bridge loan. Now, of course, we're just talking about PPP, so we added that. So that's why I'd encourage everyone to apply for both the PPP and the EIDL. Also, with the SBDC, real quick on the bridge loan, official bridge loan information is on floridadisasterloan.org. Again, floridadisasterloan.org. And now I'm going to go to the Northwest Florida Panhandle on some grant programs. So I'll be honest, I'm just the associate director, so I was lucky enough to delegate that to one of our employees. But the Panhandle is very great in the sense that we are a close-knit community, so local organizations, local chambers, cities, county governments, and then of course Gulf Power have come together and they said, hey, we're not as rich as the SBA, but we want to offer something to help businesses. So here's free money for you guys. So right now, the one I could 100% tell you is public information is called the Northwest Florida Small Business COVID-19 Recovery Grant Program. So this was graciously donated by Gulf Power, $250,000, and it offers small business owners with at least 2 employees up to $5,000 in grant money. So you don't have to pay it back if you get it. I do want to warn you guys on some specifics. So there are, of course, geographic specifics. I'm going to be broad and say from Escambia County all the way to Bay County, so that if you're in those areas, you qualify, and you have to be established on or before January 1st, 2019. And if you want information on how to apply for the grant program, which I would encourage you to do it because it's free money. I want you to have free money. Go on my website or our website, sbdc.uwf.edu. So SBDC, Small Business Development Center.uwf for University of West Florida.edu. I will warn everybody here, the requirements are very specific. So the application will be public for everyone on April 6th. However, do not submit the application on April 6th. The official application submission time will be April 8th, 8:00 a.m. until April 14th, 5 p.m. So we'll release it 2 days before so you could prepare and fill out the grant application, but do not submit it right away because you may not qualify if you don't submit it during that exact time frame. Another thing I will just encourage you guys to please check our website date at least once a day because we're anticipating 2 more grant programs, similar up to $2,500 or up to $5,000. All I can tell you guys is that one, the next one it'll be the Santa Rosa County Small Business COVID-19 Recovery Grant. So if you're in that area, just be on the lookout. We'll have more information there.
Great, thank you. Let's see here, where are we at? I think that covers the loans, the stuff that we had worked up for loans. We've got some questions that came in, and I want to pick some of those out right now, and because I think it's a good time to go through these right now. Rick J. Esty, question is, he banks through a credit union that cannot process the SBA. Do I need to go through a bank in order to process the loan requests?
Yeah, from my understanding that currently only preferred SBA lenders are processing these applications. Now, I believe there's plans to bring, other banks up to speed and make them SBA lenders as the days progress. And I think SBA has stepped up their capacity to make that happen. And beyond that, yes, I would encourage you to go to the SBA.gov and look up look at the CARES Act, and then it can drill down to the payment protection, but it will give you a list of banks in your area that are certified SBA
Well,
lenders.
You are one.
And
Correct.
Synovus
So,
Bank currently
Jay,
is one.
call Rick.
Yeah, call me.
Right? I'm not sure who this may be, Dorian. Does common ownership in several companies exceeding the 500 employees disqualify me?
Does common ownership in several?
If you have ownership, I believe what he wants to know is, or what she wants to know is, if she has ownership in companies over 500 employees, does it disqualify them from their ownership in the under 500 employee?
No.
company?
Okay. Great question. So the rule is it's the application is done by the business. So it's technically the business applying. So if you have a business that has over 500 employees and then you have a business that has 30, if you apply as that business with 30 employees, you're still good. You're in the clear. You could still apply. However, of course, the one with over 500, don't apply.
David Kelly asked is the average payroll over the year 2018, but I believe that's 2019, correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah, it's over the calendar year 2019. Jeanette Prince, does unemployment tax and employer portion tax is it included in the amount of the payroll expense? And I believe it's everything, you guys can correct me, but it's everything except for federal tax.
That's my understanding. That's correct.
Give me 1 sec. I'm going to see. I got a little cheat sheet here. I want to just confirm. It says income taxes in general. So yeah, it's my understanding, but I don't see an official answer, but I would agree.
And I've got for the bigger companies, don't let me forget there's for the bigger companies, I guess we can just answer it right now since we got that tax question. It just came out and I was informed this morning that bigger companies can defer the 6.2% Social Security and the 1.45 Medicare taxes into 2 payments, not due until December 31st of 2021, and that half due December 31st, 2021, and the other half due December 31st, 2022.
So I'm not sure on that.
Have you guys seen that yet?
I have not seen it.
Okay, this was, we can check that out, but it was Kilpatrick, Townsend, and Stockton is who we were informed by on that. What about seasonal businesses? Should we take average payroll from months affected or the entire previous year?
I'd probably do previous year. Gentlemen, do you guys have an answer?
Definitely previous year. There's going to be there are certain parameters, and I don't have it off the top of my head. I can use as a follow-up to this that for seasonal businesses that they're they would look at specific months, but I can follow up specifically after this. And
that might be something that's case by case.
They are.
All right, let's see here, Lonnie. Lonnie Hawkins, I have some new positions that were created at the end of last year and early this year. My payroll currently is more than that average of last year.
Unfortunately, you would still have to do the average of last year. That's just one of the rules.
So Lonnie, it's last year's average. Dave Kelly also asked what documentation was required, but we are providing those reports, Dave, and you should have those by noon tomorrow. This is by Christina Atwell. If a business started on 7/1/2020, what do we supply if we don't have prior tax returns? Would they be eligible?
7/1/2020?
Yeah, I would, since
Yeah,
it says 7/1/2020. So, I mean, they wouldn't be eligible, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, no, that's in July.
Yeah,
that's
right.
in July. They haven't started yet.
Perhaps she means 1/7.
I think she talking
Oh,
about
maybe she does.
2019.
Because
or-
1 and 7 are close on the keyboard.
So repeat the question. If it's 1/1/2020, if they started, would they
They don't
apply?
have previous year's averages.
Ah, okay. In that case, I would just have their monthly payroll. Yeah, if they just started, they were a new business, because the rule is if you were in business before the February 15th, I believe. So if that's the case and you have no, tax information, obviously, because you just started the business, I would document any W-2s, any, 941s. If you use a payroll service, call them and ask them, hey, get me all the docs so I could make your goal is to make your case as strong as possible with the federal government. So you want to have more than enough documentation to prove it.
So if you have instances where you don't meet the ABCs or the puzzle pieces, put together the puzzle pieces exactly for the application, make your case as strong as possible in your favor to get the funds that you're looking for.
Correct. And I'll give you guys an example with the Florida bridge loan. So one of the requirements in it is you need to have 2 years of business tax returns, right? So most people right now, my clients have not filed 2019 taxes. They have an extension, haven't filed those taxes. And some of them have started in 2018. So they really have 1 year of tax returns. With that, I ask them, okay, you have 1 year of tax returns. You need to get me your P&Ls from QuickBooks, pull them out for 2019 and year-to-date 2020, because the loan committee who makes the determination will just have limited information. So you want to give them as much information to prove and to make a realistic determination and a decision to help you out.
Excellent. So Christina, submit this year's. Deborah Sapp, we're non-essential. My employees cannot work this month. They will be returning to work May 1st if the non-essential is removed. Will I still be eligible for the PPP? You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the period goes from February 15th until July 30th. Is that right? June 30th?
June 30th. Yeah.
June 30th. So when they go back to work May 1st and for whatever they worked prior, correct?
Right.
You're eligible.
I'd still apply now. I mean, still fill out the forms, get the previous year's average payroll statements, expenses, and I would still apply now. Yeah, you're eligible.
Deborah, apply now as Dorian said, with last year's information.
Yeah, for what I'm understanding is, in the verbiage, it says that these PPP loans are for, keeping your associates employed or rehiring your associates. So you're obviously going to send some folks maybe into the unemployment line, but when you're getting them out of the unemployment line, your business is going to have capital to restart. And so I'd use that as that.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. Christina Atwell again. Will loans turn into a grant or only a portion of the loan?
So with the PPP, this is why I'm personally recommending do everything strictly payroll with there. If you do it by the rules and everything, so if you rehire your employees and you pay them and you don't have any employees that are over $100,000 or something like that, there is a very good chance that up to 100% of that will be of that loan will be turned into a grant and be forgiven.
And if I can add to that, I think an important factor is if you have one of the EIDL loans, and you have a PPP loan, and you're doing as Dorian suggested and pay your payroll with the PPP loan, you're still going to be using perhaps this EIDL loan to pay for these eligible expenses that could be included on this PPP loan. When it comes time for you to come to the bank and talk through the forgiveness process, and you still have dollars that are available, now you are eligible to pay down your EIDL loan with these PPP funds. So what you can do is you can take these PPP funds and go back and clean up some of those expenses that you may have used idle funds to do with, if that makes any sense.
Sherry Thiemann Green, can we include part-time employees?
Yeah.
Yep, I would think so. Is mortgage interest, for the PPP, is it mortgage interest only or the entire monthly mortgage payment?
Mortgage interest. That's what is outlined on the SBA's website and everything that I've seen.
For the PPP?
For the PPP.
So it's mortgage interest only?
That's correct.
Okay. Are forgiven dollars taxable? Ed?
That's a question that's still up in the air. Typically, when you have forgiveness of debt, except for certain circumstances, that would be a taxable transaction. It seems to me, just by the language that they use, saying that it's going to be converted to a grant, that they're going to end up having it as a non-taxable transaction because it's converted to a grant, and a grant is typically not taxable. So, but I think that remains to be seen. There's a lot of things that are the regulations haven't been read yet. They haven't been reviewed. They haven't been circulated among the profession. But if I had to bet, I'd bet that that's not going to be a taxable transaction.
Okay. The application, Marcia Clark writes in, the PPP application asks for the number of jobs. Is that number of employees?
Yes, that'd be number of employees.
Is that before the COVID-19 or the average like last year, or before the COVID hit and they had to let people go?
So when you're submitting your payroll reports, it's going to come down to your FTE, so your full-time equivalent. So you're going to get a good snapshot at that point of how many FTE that you had at that period in time.
Before you were affected.
Before you were affected. And then when the forgiveness is being evaluated after June, then that's when we would take another look at payroll reports and see how FTE was impacted.
And full-time or both. And we already said that part-time are included. Let's see. I think this would be for you, Dorian. We were told if we received an EIDL for the COVID-19 after March 31st, 2020, we would not be eligible to apply for the PPP. Is that true, or has that changed?
I've heard that from a lot of people calling our phones. I've seen no official directive that says that. And the official directive we've received from our corporate headquarters with the SBDC in the state of Florida is that you're allowed to apply for both. It's just you're not allowed to apply for both and use both of them for payroll funds, right? So you have to just realize you have to be able to separate that over.
I think the questions are making us drive that point home. That you're right.
Right.
So as he's been saying all along, use the PPP for payroll. All right, let's see here. We've gotten a great response to these. Back up here. So to calculate our average monthly payroll, which of these do we add in? Social Security, Medicare, FUTA, SUTA, workman's comp. You're going to be able to add in the SUTA and workman's comp, but it does not include Social Security or Medicare, correct?
Haven't seen it including that.
Which is the 7.65 we talked about.
That's correct.
And FUTA.
Nor FUTA, federal income taxes.
No, the FUTA that's the federal unemployment. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to skip that one. If you're an individual owner of a residential investment property at risk of lost rent, can you apply for the EIDL?
Yes, yeah. So the EIDL has no requirements for employees, and there actually is a section if you go on the SBA's website and apply for it. there's a special question for you that will say something like rents lost.
And so I would guess that would include owners and management companies. That's how they derive their income.
Correct. So, you know, it'd have to be based on your tax return. So the owner is what is the income you would count on your tax return, and the management company would count it too. Because we know that the management company gets a cut of it. So you couldn't, the owner theoretically couldn't add in that cut that they give to the management company.
Jeanette Prince applied for a bridge loan on 320. When might she be hearing about it?
320. Can you spell Jeanette Prince's name?
Jeannette Prince.
All right, I'll look into it today, and I'll give you a more personalized answer. Because if you filed for the bridge loan, do you mind me asking, did you file on the DEO website? Did you have to create a username and password?
Jeanette, if you're still listening, did you create a username and password on what website?
DEO's website.
DEO, yes.
Yes, okay, great. And the name is under Jeanette Prince, correct?
And it's under you, Jeanette? She hasn't answered. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, yes.
Yeah, after this, I'm gonna go back to the office and I'll just give you a call.
Jeanette, whoever you work with here, contact them so that when Dorian gets back with us, we can get you your answer.
It's good to know people, right?
Yeah, right. If this webinar didn't work for anybody, it worked for Jeanette, right? How about that action?
Pass by all those busy phones.
Let me see here. And I believe that you can use this. A small business utilizes all 1099 employees. Do they qualify for the PPP, or do each individual employee need to apply?
1099 are eligible to, you're eligible to apply to cover those 1099. Now, you know, at the time of forgiveness, I think that you have to use, this is just me talking, I think you have to use common sense. If you have somebody that services the air conditioner and does this thing at your business, and you're going to apply to cover their funds, I would caution you on that. But if these employees rely on your business to operate, they show up at your office, and that's how you transact with them, and they have their own individual sole proprietors and they work for you, then I would encourage you to apply for it.
I hope that helped, Jennifer. And if you want to get into that further, maybe Jennifer, HR@telstaffing.com, and we can talk a little bit more about that. 2019 tax returns are not done yet. Is the average for 2018, David? 2019 is what it's for, and you'll be able to use the reports that we provide you to fill out the application. Christina. Okay. So Christina, her question was 7/1/19, not 7/1/2020. So as we stated, provide the 6 months from 19. Correct, Dorian? Rick?
Yeah, I'd collect everything you can.
And then just make your case as strong as possible.
Right.
That's correct.
I guess I can read it instead of trying to read it and think about it. With the PPP, I have to relocate my business due to the current rent may not renew the lease. Rental may not renew the lease. Will the PPP loan be forgiven for me in that event that I have to do work for opening a new location? I'm a hair salon, so I'll have to provide new plumbing and flooring without carpet and working stations. So what Rebecca's saying is that she's going to have to start a new business elsewhere. Can she use that? That sounds like an idle loan to me.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to caution you. So the idle loan, these emergency bridge loans are very specific in their wording that you can only use it to pay for things that you normally would have been able to afford but cannot because of the disaster. if you start mentioning things like you have to move and start a new business somewhere else, they frown on that. So my recommendation again would be apply for the PPP just for your payroll portion. And you know, if you have to terminate the lease, yeah, I'll be honest, I don't even want to speculate here. I'll see if the other guys have anything, but I'd rather just caution you and just say, talk to your landlord and see if there's any way you could renew the lease, because that may be a little tricky and more paperwork.
Rebecca, email us at hr@telstaffing.com, and Dorian's going to look into it a little bit
Yeah.
deeper, and maybe we can give you a better answer. Sole proprietorships with no employees. I think we've stated that the PPP can be, sole proprietor can apply for that.
They can if they have payroll and,
Right.
and they have the specific expenses that were, you know, outlined within it, then, you know, absolutely.
Carla, I think contract labor, we just talked about the fact that with 1099s, you need to, if they're depending, it sounds like a deeper subject.
Certainly
That can't
is.
be answered that easily.
Yeah, that's
I
going to
think
be
we need
one
to get into that one a little bit deeper and get more specifics on how that 1099, that contractor's working.
Yeah, I would encourage you to, you know, definitely work with, you know, work specifically with your banker, work specifically with your CPA, you know, payroll company, and you'll want to really explain that. You know, there's, you know, undoubtedly there will be audit committees that are formed to police these loans and these programs, and you know, so you want to make sure that you're as upfront and, you know, and honest, and just make sure that you're getting the funds and you're using them the way that you should, and you know, see, story is 100% when you're dealing with SBA, just like Dorian had said.
Okay. Carla asked, we're using TEL, what type of documentation do we need for the PPP since we don't have W-3s or 941s? I believe, Carla, and I'll confirm it, but the documentation that we sent you should, they're in Texas, but that documentation that we sent you should do the job. That provides you the pay. You just need proof of your payroll, correct? Proof of your payroll for the 2019.
Yeah, proof of payroll for 2019, and what I'm being told, your last filed tax return. So that could be 2018. If you got off the jump line pretty quick and had 2019 complete, then it would be 2019 that you'd want to submit.
We're getting a lot of 1099 questions. I've got a 1099 worker that I pay every 2 weeks. Let's just say it's, can I include him on my payroll? So I would guess that this situation would be something like somebody that provides janitorial services and comes in and, you know, cleans, and they get paid every 2 weeks and maybe does other cleaning and everything.
I'd caution against that.
Against it?
Now, would.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in there too and say something, if you don't mind, Jim.
Please do.
The IRS recognizes that in certain professions, the 1099 is the way to pay people. For example, in the construction business, they recognize that the tradition in that particular area has been to have subcontractors. They also recognize it in the insurance business and in other like real estate and those kinds of areas. I would caution taxpayers about the use of 1099s outside of those areas. I would ask them to seek professional advice about that, and understand that that might not be the correct way to pay those people.
Okay. Sherry, you can, so they're cautioning against it, Sherry. And again, email us at hr@telstaffing.com if you want to talk about it a little bit more or get a little more in depth on it. Banks are asking for 941s, even if they say TEL is on the even if they say TEL on the report. I'll have to get with my HR about that and payroll about that, Joe. And see, I don't know. I didn't see. All I know is the documents are being sent out. I don't know if it's if anybody from TEL's listening. Are 941s what we're sending out to our clients?
Can I jump in there, Jim?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think we're sending the 941s if they're in TEL's name, because that wouldn't make sense. we're probably sending a report that isolates the employees that belong to that specific or employer that we share the
That makes sense.
responsibility with.
That makes sense.
The
Joe,
banks are asking for the 941s because there's a reconciliation process at the end of every quarter that reconciles the quarterly payroll. And the 941 form is the form that is the reconciliation process with the government. So it wouldn't make sense for them to ask for that in the circumstance where they have a PPO and we share the responsibility with the employer. So I think that they're going to have to come up to speed on that at some point, and that's probably one of the things that Rick's talking about when he says it's not all nailed down yet.
So we're not sending, Renee said we're not sending 941s. Oh, we are sending certified 941 reports. Thank you, Lee. We are. Back to that 1099 from Sherry. It is her firm administrator. He manages several businesses.
Yeah, I mean, you need to seek professional advice about that, okay? There's a 20 rule test that the IRS has for determining whether a person is an employee or not an employee. And that 20 rule test will be applied irrespective of what you say or what the so-called contract employee says. So I'd urge you to seek professional advice about that.
What about Rick? Does that sound like this is a 1099 employee. He's a firm administrator. He does this for several businesses. Could she include him?
Yeah, it almost sounds like she could, but does he have employees, and is he going to file for the same thing? Is he going to file to cover his payroll again? And these are the things that,
which is something he could do if he's a sole proprietor. He can file for that himself.
You're exactly right. And so that's what you just really have to be careful with, is that if when you go to double paying and somebody's going to have to repay, so you want to make sure you're crossing those T's and dotting your I's, and you're making sure that if you're filing to recover his payroll, that he's not filing to recover his payroll. And so it's going to be you want to do it as open and communicative as you possibly can.
All right, one more question, and then we're going to move on and get into loan forgiveness. But Dorian, can I qualify for the bridge loan if I am a foreign corporation established in Louisiana? I am registered in the state of Florida as a foreign corporation. I have a physical location in Pensacola and employ 10.
Then I'm going to venture and say yes. I'll give you another example. We actually had this occur during the first week of the disaster, where the main corporation was in Georgia. They owned several fast food restaurants in the Panhandle area, literally brick and mortar location and everything. We processed that loan. So I would still encourage you to apply. I'm going to be cautious. Just make sure you're fully registered in the state of Florida and you're on SunBiz, things like that, and you should be good.
Excellent. I think, okay, let's get into loan forgiveness. A lot of great questions, you guys out there. We appreciate you being on and taking advantage of this, and a lot of great questions. Loan forgiveness. I'm going to give this to you, Dorian. I think we've covered it already. I'm going to give you 2 questions in one. Will I have to pay the loan back? What does a business need to do to be eligible for loan forgiveness?
Gotcha. So best general advice, don't let go of any of your employees, keep them on board, and it will be forgiven if you do everything right. With that, we talked about record keeping earlier. You have to have diligent record keeping behaviors or habits in your business, because when you go back and go, hey, can you please forgive this loan, they're going to ask you for documentation. So to apply, you're going to have all of the previous years to go, hey, this is how big of the loan that we want. And then to actually get it forgiven, you're going to need to provide the documentation showing you haven't let people off, or you haven't let people go, you haven't dropped their payroll or anything like that, and that you've actually been paying them.
If we can summarize it, if you've applied for $100,000, Dorian, and that was your average last year.
If you spent $100,000 last year, you got a $100,000 loan now, and you spend all of that $100,000 on the eligible payroll expenses, that loan should be completely forgiven.
So that answers the question, how can I calculate the amount of, you need to use that, how can I calculate the amount of what is or isn't going to be forgiven? you need to use that question and apply some common sense to it.
Yeah, so we want to make sure, like wages, if you offer 401k benefits or something like that, part of their pay or sick leave or something like that, you want to make sure those are the numbers that are added and not things like, federal income tax or
Great.
social security, sorry. Yeah, like things like that.
If you lay if you lay employees off after you receive the loan, you won't be able to live, you probably won't be able to receive full loan forgiveness.
Correct. We don't have details on it exactly, but likely the SBA, if they have it now, which they likely do, it's something internal, but it will likely be a portion. It will be proportional. So if you got that $100,000 loan, you spent $40,000 on your employees, and you had to let go $60,000 worth of employees, odds are up to that $40,000 that you actually used in the way that the loan was intended will be forgiven, and that $60,000 will be wrapped into a loan, that 10-year loan at 4% interest or whatever the SBA does.
I didn't see on here, oh, here it is. It's coming up here in a few, but I believe that it changed. It went way down. We were at 4%. I heard today something about, Rick, 0.5% or 2.5%? I can't remember which number I heard at lunch.
So in terms of
Interest rate for what wasn't forgiven.
Of what, so yeah, that is, it seems to be a little bit flexible, but from what I'm being told is that the amounts not forgiven at the end of the period when the loans are evaluated will be termed out over a period of 2 years, and the rate would differentiate between profit and nonprofit. So nonprofit would have a little bit less rate at, I think, 2.75, and the for-profit would have a little bit higher at 3.75.
Okay. Good. If I'm not eligible for loan forgiveness or only part of the forgiveness, when does repayment start? When do payments start?
So when the PPP loans are administered from the guidance I've been given, you'll have 6 months of no payments while interest is continuing to accrue. So whatever interest that you have will continue to go to the back of the loan. Then payments will be, you'll have to start paying at that point, and it would be interest only payments from my understanding until the forgiveness decision is made.
Okay, so interest, so from approval, 6 months out, no payments.
That's correct.
Interest does start upon approval or issuance of the monies.
Yep, that funding interest does start accruing.
Okay. Can I make an interest? It's interest only until loan forgiveness is decided.
That's my understanding, yes.
What if you're having trouble paying the paying the whole payment after that's decided? Can you make interest only payments?
That is a question that is way out in front. So I apologize, I don't have that information. The forgiveness, what that process looks like, and then as well as the minute details that such as you're asking, have not been released to myself nor Dorian yet.
Ed, on the interest on the unforgiven portions of any loans, is that interest deductible?
Absolutely. It's the cost of doing business.
What if I'm an already existing borrower? Is there any relief for me? Deferred payments, interest only?
Yeah, so there's, I think every bank is doing a bit of their own thing from, as it pertains to how they're helping their current clients. I can tell you, we have Synovus Bank has a very streamlined process to help our clients through a deferment. And so what we are doing is we're waiving your payments or deferring your payments for the next 90 days or 90 days from the time that the deferment agreement is signed. And those payments are being rolled on to the back of your loan. And so as long as you pay and catch those payments up over the term of your loan, it's not going to be an issue at balloon or at time that you pay the loan off. If those things aren't paid over that period of time, then you would have a balloon payment at the end of your term. I hope that answered the question.
Okay. And again, if you don't quite get the answer you're looking for in this, ask the question here, in the webinar, or email us at hr@telstaffing.com. Did you cover SBA Express loans to the degree that you wanted to, Dorian?
Yeah.
Okay. So any changes to the SBA Express loans?
So typically if you get, that's more so for, let's say, starting a business or expanding your business. Typically the limit is 350,000 and the goal is to, get it done relatively quickly. They've increased it to $1 million though.
Okay. I heard something today at lunch. I'm not sure how or this applies, but loan where you can request, it used to be 5, but now like 10,000 that you can get like very quickly.
Gotcha. So that's the EIDL loan. So
that is the EIDL.
Yeah,
okay.
the economic injury disaster loan. And interestingly enough, it depends if you guys have applied for it. It really depends on when you applied, because during the start of this crisis, they used their decades-old system. Then last week, they changed the application system to like a drag and drop feature. And then they changed it one more time to the new system. So cool thing about EIDL is it's super easy to apply now. And there's literally a question there that goes, hey, you could get it up to a $10,000 advance on this EIDL loan. If you do get it, or if you do get the advance, regardless of whether or not you're approved or denied for the EIDL loan, that should also be forgivable, up to $10,000 of what they give you.
So would you say that again for me?
Yeah, so if you apply for an EIDL loan, that's that cookie cutter standard disaster loan. They ask a question, hey, would you be interested in up to $10,000 as an advance, where they give it to you right now because they know you need cash quickly? So most people are going to say yes. It's not saying they will give you 10,000, it's saying up to 10,000. So they may give you 2,000. If they give you that cash, let's say they give you $8,000, regardless of if after they actually process the whole EIDL loan and find out that you don't qualify or you're not approved, or if they find out, hey, yeah, we'll offer them 200,000, that first $8,000 or up to $10,000 will be forgiven or forgivable.
Okay, and
no requirements on that. The SBA just says it will be forgivable.
Excellent. Let's see here. Are there other SBA? I think we've covered all the SBA loans that are available, monies that are available. In and out of the CARES Act. If I apply for and am granted one of these loans, will it affect my eligibility for other available loans? We said no. Which are SBA loans? Which of all the loans we talked about today, which ones are handled through the bank and which go through the SBA? Gotcha.
So real quick, Florida Bridge Loan, that's done with DEO or the SBDC. So that's a state-only program. The EIDL loan is the federal government. You go online and you file for that. And then the PPP, on treasury.gov, they have the application form, but that is strictly done through your banker. So the PPP is applied through and processed from your bank.
And treasury.gov has that application.
Correct. And they have also a great high-level overview with some questions for you guys if you need more.
There's
detail.
A COVID link on the homepage.
Yeah, so most government websites now, really including ours, if you go on the website, big red banner that says, hey, COVID, click here. So just be sure to click there and take your time with reading it, because they are different programs. And, some of them, like the bridge loan, says you need 2 employees. EIDL says you don't need any employees. So you want to make sure that you read it very carefully and remember what you apply for.
Okay. And so the PPP application's on the treasury.gov, but that's applied for through the bank, through your bank. The other programs, where do they go for those? So
the SBA EIDL loan, the economic injury disaster loan, that's going to be on, if you Google SBA disaster loan, I forget the exact URL, but it's something like covid19.disaster.gov. I forget, but if you Google SBA disaster loan, or if you just go on sba.gov, similarly, click COVID-19. And then for the Florida Bridge Loan is going to be floridadisasterloan.org. And then the grants that I talked about earlier, only for Northwest Florida, that will be sbdc.uwf.edu. And I will also send you a link with like a synopsis of this so you could share it with participants.
And for any of you that came on late, we will be posting this on our website, telstaffing.com, a link to the recording of this webinar. What information do employers need? We've kind of gone over that, the 941s for the PPP. Is there any special tracking or verification businesses need to be doing? Keep good records that we've already just talked about of everything you do. Do I have to claim any of this income on my taxes at the end of the year?
I'm not sure the meaning of the question.
Same.
A loan is not income, so is that what we're talking about?
Maybe. Okay, that's good enough answer.
Yeah, okay,
That's a
yeah.
good
A
enough
loan
answer.
is not income. Of course.
How do we put these grants on our books?
Good question. Actually, the loan would go on first as a liability naturally, and then it would be reduced according to the amortization schedule. The grant would probably end up being some non-taxable income or something of that nature. That's a good question.
Okay. If you have that question, HR@telstaffing.com, and we'll get back to you. This is the last one that's kind of on ours. And maybe that was just the same thing as we just talked about, but how will all of this affect business owner taxes and tax returns next year?
Well, I mean, if you're paying interest, you're going to have a tax deduction for the interest that's paid in the course of having a business loan. That's the main way I think that these items are going to affect the tax liability for our clients. There's some other tax things that we might want to go over real quickly on the bullet points here, Jim, if we have time.
Yep, let's go ahead.
Okay, these are just bullet points I'm getting from my cheat sheet. I just want to get this information out there. A lot of people know already about the stimulus checks. A single person with $75,000 or less of income will get $1,200 stimulus check. That check will come automatically based on the tax return that you filed. And that limit goes up to $95,000 and it gradually reduces itself. For married persons, it goes from $150,000 to $198,000. And there's $500 credit or a stimulus check for every child. To go along with the SBA loans and the loan stimulus and the things that the government's trying to do in terms of funding, business funding, they're also cutting the payroll taxes for employers who employ less than 500 employees and making it mandatory that they be given family leave. So make sure you consult with your professional tax advisor or your payroll processor to make sure you're claiming those credits and to identify those particular payments as family leave payments. And there's also a credit for sick leave. There's also a credit for employee retention. So in your payroll salary, you're going to have to identify the particulars of each one of these particular credits that are available against the payroll taxes for the various different types of payroll that are being paid. A thing that's not being discussed too often among the groups that are discussing the COVID aid packages is typically during disasters, when the president declares a disaster area, people who live in that disaster area are permitted to withdraw money from their deferred plans like IRAs, 401ks, and so on, without a penalty if it's an early withdrawal. This now applies nationally because we're now in a national disaster, and you're allowed to withdraw up to $100,000 without a penalty from any deferred plan like 401ks and IRAs and so on and so forth. That's a source of funding for you until you have a chance to get one of these loans perhaps, and then pay back the money to your IRA or pay back the money to your 401k plan. There's a $300 charitable deduction above the line, which would not require itemization for next year's taxes as well. And there's a few other small things that don't apply to a large group of people. So the main things you want to look out for in the tax realm, the three main things you want to look out for if we summarize it: the payroll tax credits, and they apply to certain different types of payments you make for certain different reasons: family leave, sick leave, employee retention, and so on and so forth. The withdrawal from the retirement plans and the above the line charitable tax deduction. So
Okay.
if you want any information about that in more detail, I would urge you to go to the IRS website, irs.org, And right at the top left-hand side, there's a section called COVID-19. And you just click on that and you can come to all the different discussions about the various credits and so on and so forth. I think every employer should become familiar with the credits and be ready to substantiate the types of payments they made so that they can claim the credit that's available against their payroll taxes.
Okay, let's see here. We got about 4 more questions and then we can wrap it up. We were going to try and keep it to an hour, but we're going to be about an hour 20, hour 25. So does a borrower, and I'll kind of come quick on these if I can answer them, and then Rick and Dorian, at least on this first one, if you need to correct me, you can. Does a borrower have to show current economic losses to obtain these loans? On the PPP, they're providing, if it's used for payroll, they're providing last year's records and they don't need to show losses.
That's correct.
Any of the other loans?
So EIDL, they do want you to show that there is some kind of economic injury, and also with the bridge loan, with the Florida bridge loan. A cool thing about it that we've noticed, there's a checkbox on, hey, tell us what you lost. So many people are basically saying like, we were shut down. We have no idea how much money we're going to lose. We're a restaurant. So it's okay to just check the box, leave it blank, or, put a question mark that you don't know. So if you are experiencing, short answer, you have to show that you are experiencing economic injury. Long answer is they're not expecting you to have it down to a science where you know how to calculate exactly what that number is.
Okay. Let's see, on forgiveness, if you have enough money in reserves to cover your expenses without the loan, are you still eligible to be forgiven? Which I would say the answer to that is yes.
I
would say so as well.
Okay. We got the recording. Stimulus check question. What if you have a 17-year-old child that is your dependent? How much are you given for that dependent because the cutoff age is less than 17? Is that something we can answer?
If the cutoff age is 17, you don't get anything. If the cutoff age is if the child's below that, then you would get $500 for every child, as long as you meet the income criteria. Married, filing joint, 150,000 AGI, and it phases out to 198,000.
Last question. This is an unemployment question. Let's see if we can answer it for Rebecca. The benefits have been a little bit confusing. When it was said self-employment and sole proprietorship was included with the unemployment benefits for this disaster. Any data on that subject?
I really don't know. I'm sorry.
I would guess that's something,
Well,
Rebecca.
I know that the Department of Labor has issued some guidelines to the states. Remember, every unemployment program in this country is administered by the state governments, not by the federal government. So, but the federal government has issued some guidelines, and I think the CARE Act has increased by $600, whatever the payment being made to people that were unemployed by the various states, or has at least released funds for the states to do so, if I understand it correctly. And also you must remember that unemployment is taxable. So
Right.
If you take unemployment and then you get reemployed and your salary goes back up to the level where it's going to be a taxable salary, then your unemployment is going to be thrown into that, and that's going to be taxed as well.
Okay.
A lot of states have forgiveness for unemployment as tax liability, but in Florida, we don't have an income tax, so it wouldn't matter.
Okay, I think we've pretty much covered everything. We're kind of over our time. I want to thank everybody. Rick, any last words?
No, for me. If any way that I can help, again, Rick McClanahan, Synovus Bank. My email is Rick McClanahan. That's RickMcClanahan @Synovus, and that's SYNOVUS.com. Feel free to shoot me whatever questions that you may have, and I'll get those answered.
Dorian?
Just real quick, I like to just have a quick summary. Grants local in the area, go on sbdc.uwf.edu. If you need cash now and you're struggling, the Florida Bridge Loan on floridadisasterloan.org will likely process your bridge loan quicker than you'll get cash from the SBA. The EIDL loan, the EIDL loan, that's your long-term road to recovery loan for disasters, and then the PPP payroll only. If you guys have any questions for me, my email is Dorian, DORIAN @uwf.edu.
All right, thank you. I'll provide everybody's contact information. We're going to do a follow-up with some show notes. Ed?
One last thing. The scammers are already out there scamming people.
Yep.
So make sure you're dealing with a reputable banker like Rick. Make sure you're dealing with a reputable paid person like Dorian. Make sure you have a good attorney and a good accountant helping you. And do this the right way and stay away from the scammers. Be alert.
Yep, they are out there, and the IRS is already sending out warnings for different scams that are going on. Everybody that joined us today, thank you to you guys, Dorian, Rick, and Ed, Lee at the production table here. I appreciate it. Everybody that joined us out there, thank you for all the questions and for joining us. Remember, a copy of the video and a link to the application at telstaffing.com. If you have any more questions and you want to get into any more detail, HR@telstaffing.com. Whatever it might be, let us know. And I'm sure we'll have a follow-up on this whole situation coming up here before too long. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Have a great week.